Have necessarily all the legal rights of individuals who are married.
Without those legal rights, their family is potentially jeopardized every time they leave the state. And even in their own state of Connecticut, Laura and Özlem are still excluded from marriage and the societal stamp of approval that it gives.
Yes, our family looks a little different, but I mean, I want to be the same. I want to be the same as everyone else. I have 5 brothers and sisters, and 4 of them are married with kids, and there's 14 grandkids in my family, and my dad's just around now. He treats my 2 children as one of the 14 grandchildren, and we're recognized as a couple like all the other couples, but we're missing that piece. I just went to a wedding last week, and it just became glaringly apparent to me that I'm missing a lot of that social recognition. That, in many ways, our family is the same as my siblings' families or our neighbors, and we have great neighbors. I mean, everyone's very supportive to us, but marriage makes every family a little bit more stable. It makes you have to work a little harder. I think a civil union has been a very important first step, but marriage is what makes us all equal. It is the glue of society, is the glue of our community. All the people on our street are all married families. And although we look exactly the same, we're missing that one piece.
Tracy and Katie became sweethearts in nursing school, and from the start, they knew they wanted children.
We've been together for 7 years, and we talked about having kids for a long time. I think almost since we met and started dating, and we had, we were in school, we were in grad school, so we really had plans of what we needed to do for that happen. And actually, one of the things we really needed to do, I think we agreed, that was to have a wedding ceremony or some kind of commitment ceremony. I tried to get pregnant for almost a year, and then we sort of weren't successful, so we waited, and then this January we tried again, and so it worked this last time that we tried, and so we're expecting a baby in October.
And everyone is excited about the arrival of the baby.
We have family near and far. We have tons of friends locally, and our families, I think especially our grandmothers are just so cute and thrilled. And my sister had a baby a year ago. My sister is actually also pregnant, due within a day. We're 1 day apart in due dates, and so we have a niece, and we're going to have another niece, and the cousins are going to grow up like the same age, 30 minutes away from each other, and my parents being first-time grandparents, and her parents first-time grandparents, and everybody's very excited. The anticipation is growing.
I'm pretty impressed with both her grandmothers and my grandmother. They're very, even more so than our parents in some ways. For them, it's all about the fact that we're a loving couple. We love each other very much. We're very supportive of each other, and I think part of it is how we approach it. We're not very aggressive about it. We just sort of live our lives the way anyone would live their lives, and so we're not very in your face, but we're not behind the scenes.
Tracy and Katie have always done things their way, without apology, and that includes their wedding.
We had about 200 people at our wedding. It was our church wedding. It was before you could have a civil union. It was in 2004. And we joked that there were 200 people there, and about 15 of them were horrified by how liberal and out of the norm this ceremony was, and there were about 15 that were horrified by how conservative and conventional the ceremony was, and then everyone else was just partying. It was fantastic.
Whether the ceremony was liberal or conservative, Tracy and Katie considered themselves married.
And I think even from the very beginning, we called it a wedding. We called it a marriage, and I call her my wife. I no longer call her my partner, because she is not a partner. She's my wife. I am married to her. That is my relationship to her.
The marriage also helped the families understand and have words to describe Tracy and Katie's relationship.
In my mind, this relationship is the same as my sister and her husband's relationship, and I think there were a lot of words that people didn't have, and that people didn't have a vision. It was important to me that they have a vision for what our relationship is, and that's what we do for weddings.
Ironically, it was only after they got married that Tracy and Katie were able to have legal ties under the civil union law.
With the T's crossed and the I's dotted, about a dozen couples lined up in Hartford City Hall for the paperwork they could have gotten a day ago, a license for a civil union.
We were the first female couple to have a civil union, to get civil unionized in Hartford.
So we got our, we signed the paperwork, we got our license, we went and had our ceremony outside on the brick plaza, and one of the justices of the pieces was there, and she performed the ceremony, and so they taped us doing that, and we kissed at the end, and so now it's shown over and over
Stock
and over
footage.
again.
But I think that having the civil union was an important step, but it definitely to us means very little in terms of verifying, validating our commitment. And beyond that, we're hoping that someday it doesn't have to be a separate thing where, my sister got married and I got a civil union, and I think that explaining that to people becomes hard. They don't understand that there's a federal recognition and a state recognition, and as far as they're concerned, we're married, and many of them don't realize that doesn't apply to federal, and many of them do and are pretty, outraged by it.
In 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed into law. This federal law limits marriage to between a man and a woman. Under this discriminatory law, same-sex couples are excluded from the more than 1,000 rights, protections, and benefits that are afforded to every married heterosexual couple in the United States.
It limits our freedoms because legally our civil union is only legal in the states where civil unions have passed. So if I want to move back home to Ohio, part of the reason it has never been a consideration is because we aren't recognized there, and I don't want to be in a position where I get to the hospital and something bad happens. I don't want to have to pull out papers and say, no, really, I can be in there. I'm making these decisions for her. I don't want there to be any question between family or friends. I don't want there to be any, all of the protections that the law provides is, a lot of it is for worst case scenario. And God forbid we're in the worst case scenario. That's not when I want to find out that I have nothing.
Since 1996, 43 states have passed their own defense of marriage laws and even gone so far as to amend their constitutions to prevent same-sex couples from marrying. 2006 was a particularly aggressive year.
There was that day, the election day, when all of those measures were passed, constitutional amendments, and all those DOMAs were, and I think constitutional amendments against same-sex marriage were passed, and it really felt that next day like there had been this anonymous mob that had come to our yard and spray painted things, and it really felt like people that didn't know us, that had never met us, that knew nothing about who we were. It became very personal. When you hear people in self-righteousness act, it sounds like they're afraid of what might happen if I'm allowed to be considered married or grant equal rights. And to me, it makes no sense. I don't understand how someone could be so against something that has nothing to do with their family.
With the arrival of their baby Jake, Tracy and Katie are like new parents everywhere, intent on the challenges of raising a family and looking to a bright future. Partners for 19 years, political activists James and Norman have been at the forefront of the discussion on marriage equality in Connecticut, a discussion that is already spilling over into other states.
Ultimately, the issue of marriage gets to this idea that I think if you have a civil union, it in a way provides a kind of backwater that stays in Connecticut. But I think that the more states that actually confront this and the issue becomes marriage means that at some point, constitutionally, in a federal sense, there's going to have to be an acceptance of the idea that this is going to have to be incorporated